Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special live stream edition of Shifting the Paradigm. Hello, everyone in the live chat: Logan, Field, Tony, Zenza, Jessica, Nunu, Cosmic, Darkstar, Canoodles, and welcome to all of those listening on podcast platforms. I hope those of you who celebrate Christmas had a wonderful time. And well, I seriously can't believe that it's already almost 2023. The year seems to fly by, right? But I feel like I say that every single year. And I'm also aware I am not the only person that says that as years and years progress, they feel shorter and shorter. Am I right? But it has been quite a year for developments with trying to figure out what is behind the UFO mystery as far as the government and NASA is concerned, at least publicly. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Before we get started, I would like to run through a few quick announcements. First, I am super pumped about my new channel, Cosmic Portals. And John Russell, thank you so much for the super sticker. I deeply appreciate that. So, as many of you may know I'm a big fan of ambient space music. It helps me relax, it puts me to sleep because I suffer with insomnia. But the Cosmic Portals channel is where I'll be posting my own musical compositions in the ambient space music genre. I just posted a new track today, which I guarantee will stimulate your imagination and get you relaxed. So please check that out. And if you like the music there, hit the like button and subscribe. I will place the direct link in the live chat. Let me go ahead and do that. Perfect. And then I've also had a lot of you message me and ask me about donating to my Research Motorhome Fund for when I graduate and do the National UFO and Paranormal Hotspots Tour, which I am very grateful for. Thank you so much. So, in answer to that, I have 3 tiers now on my Patreon called On the Road Videos with different levels of donating. So doing so will make you an official UFO, an official show sponsor and contribute greatly to the fund for the motorhome and the research equipment. So I will also place that link in the live chat as well. And just a reminder to join me and Jimmy Church on Thursday for Mysteries with a History, the theme of which I will announce on Twitter tomorrow, and then weekly strange news at 3 p.m. PST on Friday. Whew, a lot of announcements going on. But overall, I've learned so much this year about the many aspects of the UFO phenomenon and the topics of the paranormal and everything in between. I've definitely had my paradigm shifted over and over, due greatly to the many amazing guests on my show over the last year. So I want to begin with talking about some of those shows which have greatly opened my eyes and gifted my perspective. So I'm going to share my screen here of the thumbnails that I've created for the shows over the past year, and we're going to do it in date order. The first one is with Steve Mera. Before we get started, how many of you have seen that particular interview? Yes, no. Well, if you haven't, I recommend it. That's why we are covering that today. So, by this time, which I interviewed him April 12th, by this time, I was already beginning to see this connection with the paranormal and the UFO phenomenon. But Steve Mera has been one of the very few guests that I've interviewed that has significantly researched the two. And he mentioned that when he was doing the research for Project Blue Book, that there was a lot of references in a sense to the paranormal, but then it was very quickly brushed off, stating that when the people were conducting this project, that they were only focusing on UFOs, which it makes sense because that's the purpose of Project Blue Book. But there were a lot of witnesses that had encountered UFOs or had had a UFO sighting. They were also getting some paranormal activity as well. However, it's incredibly unfortunate that those tidbits were not documented when people, especially J. Allen Hynek and his partner, did not document that aspect of it, the paranormal aspect. So he dove really deep into that, and it blew my mind back in April, where I'm like, I actually didn't know that about Project Blue Book. And then he also talks about behavioral sciences and psychology, which is incredibly important no matter if you're in this field or any field of research that you enjoy. Understanding the human mind, understanding at least basic psychology, you're able to communicate better. You're able to understand the other person better, and you're also able to ask the questions that need to be asked as well, because we need to look at people's mannerisms. We need to look at the way that they speak, their word choice. These are all incredibly important, and very specifically when you're dealing with people that have had a UFO experience, because for some it can be traumatic, for others it can be exciting, and you need to know how to handle the situation, because if you just go in blind, not understanding basic psychology, it's not going to be good for you, not going to be good for them either. So knowing the basics is really important, and he emphasized that, which was also really cool about his. And there are so many interviews that we're going to be covering today that blew my mind. But one more thing that I would like to cover that was really unique about this particular interview that I did with Steve Mara is that he looked into, quote, the alien mummies in Peru, and he did extensive research. He went to Peru, he looked at these skeletons, only to find out that they were fake and that they were so meticulously done, but it was all a hoax. And he had this sense of humility to walk me through this whole journey, this whole process that he did, only to find out that those alien mummies, those alien hybrid mummies weren't real. And that takes courage to say that publicly, that you dedicated so much of your life to, and then it wasn't fruitful. So I think that in this field, it can be difficult to decipher the truth from fiction. But when you have one, an open mind, but two, that you don't necessarily bring your ego with you, that it's not going to be so bruised, right? When you find out that it isn't true, or if you make a mistake. And that story in particular that he relayed to us in this audience, this community, it really stuck with me. And it goes to show that we all make mistakes, no matter what field you're in, no matter what your job occupation is. We're going to find out usually the hard way what is true and what isn't. So that really stuck with me. And if you haven't seen it, please go ahead and watch that interview. The what about alien mummies? That sounds cool, Roger, right? But the next one, and like I said, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to be speeding through these just slightly. But the next one is with Mike Ricksecker. How many of you have seen that particular interview or heard it on your podcast platform of choice? Mike is pretty well known in the community of the paranormal, and I got to speak with him about shadow people very specifically, and also about the Alaskan Triangle. I would like to state right off the bat that he is an incredible storyteller. Everything that he was saying, I was sitting in the back like, oh my gosh, I was so sucked into the way that he was telling stories. And he's also had his own personal experience with shadow people that he goes into at the very beginning, and then he kind of connects it to the end of the interview as well, which I found incredibly fascinating, which I will be using that word a lot because it's been an insane year with learning about the UFO phenomenon, the paranormal, and even cryptids, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But he mentioned that he had a shadow person experience when he was young, and this entity actually touched Mike and crossed his arms over his chest and then ran away. Of course, when you are a young child and this happens to you, you're mortified of this situation. So he said that he ran to his parents' room, and his parents just said, "No, it was nothing. You're just imagining it. It was just a bad dream." Turns out many, many years later that he went under regression hypnosis to attempt and find the answers of what happened to him as a child, because ever since that moment when he was very young, he's been fascinated with the paranormal, which goes to show that it only takes one experience, one encounter, one book, one documentary to start your journey. You don't need to have an experience to be fascinated with this. But if you do, it does help, of course. And for him in particular, he had an experience and that's how he got started. Well, in this regression hypnosis session, he mentioned that he was able to ask this entity questions in a way, and stating that this entity was from another space. Mike said, "Do you mean another dimension?" And this shadow entity said, "No, no, no, another space." And Mike said, "Well, why did you cross my arms as a child over my chest?" And this entity stated, "I wanted to give you a hug using you," which is very interesting. And the reason to why this became a very important interview to me was because with this story that Mike mentioned, it's all about perspective. As a child, not understanding the situation, he's scared. He thinks he's being threatened, that he's in harm. Many, many years later, he finds out that this entity allegedly was just attempting to comfort like little child Mike, right? Not an adult Mike, but like little child Mike. And I think that when we are open-minded and in a sense where if we don't think that everything is a threat to us, maybe, just maybe life would be a little bit easier to understand and we would be more in a sense explore more as fear is not attached to us. Very much like in the movie Dune, fear is the mind killer, right? In this instance, I feel like that resonates very well with this story. He also talks about the Hat Man, the old hag as well, and you can find all of this in his book, A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People. And then we also touched on the Alaskan Triangle, which is an incredible place where you have this hotspot right almost in the center of Alaska, where you're getting UFO sightings, disappearances, cryptid sightings, paranormal sightings. You're getting everything in this place. And these triangles are consistent across the globe, which before I had interviewed him, I knew very little of the Alaskan Triangle and other places like this. But after speaking to him, he placed me on this journey to continue looking into these locations to the point where we spoke about the mysteries of Alaska on Mysteries with a History, and even did the mysteries of the Alaskan Triangle on the Unknown Zone as well. Goes to show that when you speak to people, right, it's going to open your mind to all of these new and different rabbit holes that you didn't necessarily expect to jump into. If you haven't seen that interview, again, totally recommend that you watch it. Moving on to our next one. Bam, bam, bam. Let's go. This one was with Ray Hernandez. And what's unique about this particular interview, and you'll notice that with these ones that I'm mentioning that were covered on Shifting the Paradigm, they're not all UFO related. Or if they are, they have unique little topics regarding UFOs. And this one is about UFOs and consciousness. Ray mentioned in his interview that he was an atheist before he had a UFO experience. He didn't believe in UFOs, he didn't care for them. He thought that everything was science, and that was it. Everything was explainable. But after his wife had a very, in a sense, a spiritual encounter where she was meditating or praying for a certain period of time, and then she believed that she was visited by a saint. She relays the story to Ray. Ray has his own experience, and then his whole life changes. His paradigm shifts completely to where he's no longer an atheist, but he is believing in UFOs. He's believing in an afterlife. He is believing in the religious aspect as well. And what's interesting about his research in particular is that he has written these extensive books. I mean, they are thick, but are they amazing? Because he wrote them with several other PhDs, where not only are they looking at the science aspect of consciousness, which is incredibly difficult, let me just say that, but also conducting surveys across the United States of people that have had UFO experiences, how they perceived these encounters. Were they positive? Were they negative? What happened afterward? What happened to your religious beliefs if you had any? And what he and his colleagues realized was that for a good amount of people, I'm not saying everyone, but for a good amount of people that had UFO experiences or UFO encounters, they were somewhat positive if worded correctly in that survey, which links back to Steve Mera, that psychology and behavioral sciences is very important, knowing how to word things. But he stated that people that had a positive UFO experience, their religious stance or their faith changed, or they became, in a sense, more spiritual. Now, spirituality is a very loose term, and you can say it, how you like, but you can find these in his book, and I wrote them down. It's The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligences and a Greater Reality, a New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness and the Paranormal and the Contact Modalities. Fascinating books. I would like to state for those of you here for the Missing 411 review, that will be coming up later in the show. And for those watching this after the live, use the chapter index to jump around the show timelines as well, which I really enjoy doing, to be honest with you. But before we jump away from Ray, how many of you have seen that particular interview? It's really good. Okay. But I promise we're going to get into the review of Missing 411, the UFO Connection, which I'm not even going to say anything yet. We're going to hold on to that. Moving on to our next round, the next interesting interview on shifting the paradigm is with Nathaniel Giles. Now, when I first got into this field, there were a lot of people telling me online, sending me messages, complete strangers, stating, aliens or demons. That's what they are. Like, you shouldn't be looking into this. And I'm like, what is that where are people getting this information from? I don't understand. So I had the privilege to speak with demonologist Nathaniel Gillis. Excuse me, I said his name wrong the first time. I do apologize. And he opened my eyes to this other realm, practically, this other rabbit hole of looking at demon history and looking at extraterrestrials or even alien abductions. And a really good example of this is when I asked him about the incubus and the succubus, which are these sexual type demons that in some cases can remove the sperm out of males or impregnate women as well. And you think, okay, these are absolute demons. But if we take away those labels and look at alien abductions, you're getting that same kind of feel, right? Now, that's not the case for every single instance with incubus and succubus or with alien abductions. There are some differences, but there are some correlations, or there is a little bit of bleed through as well. And it is with these labels that can really confuse people, and myself included. When I interviewed him back in May, I was like, I don't really understand this whole demon thing and demonology. Can you please explain it to me? Because I want to understand. And he did a really fantastic job in doing that, talking about these labels and also how there is a possible connection to those and aliens as well. Really cool. Also, the way that he speaks, fantastic. If you haven't seen that interview, please watch it. It's awesome. XR says Lilith before Eve. That's right. Okay. Moving on to our next one. Okay, this one is UFO related, and it was with Chase Kletsky. So she is someone that has been in the field for several decades. She was once a part of MUFON, and she claimed in the interview that she's done about 1,000 investigations on UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and even ancient artifacts, such as the famous elongated skulls in Peru and Bolivia. While her background knowledge and all the information under her belt were incredible, what was really interesting about this particular interview was her alleged encounter with an extraterrestrial. And how the story goes, and I'm just kind of speeding through this because I think that these are all fantastic interviews that you should watch in depth. But in this one, she mentioned that she got a call from a MUFON comment or a MUFON report where some guy in Tennessee had seen lights in the sky. And she said that while lights in the sky might not sound so enticing, there usually is something a little bit more to it. So she was actually one of the few investigators, while a part of MUFON, who would still investigate these lights in the sky, quote unquote. And when she went there, she spoke to the witness, and the witness started giving all these extra details that weren't written in that original report. And while this witness is showing Chase and her partner at the time the location to where this UFO was seen, that's where it gets crazy. Allegedly, she mentioned that while they were all in the cornfield, 3 people in total, that there was this huge sense of fear, like fear in every single cell of their body. And it wasn't just fight or flight mode, it was like they need to get out of there. And so all 3 of them are running with no explanation whatsoever. Chase bumps into the witness, and both of these people see an alien in the cornfield. And Chase mentioned that she was able to feel this horrible sense of fear from this extraterrestrial, which is seriously insane. But they were so scared, not because of the situation, but because what it seems to be as if this fear was transmitting from the extraterrestrial to the rest of the group, that they continued to flee. But as that information processed in her mind once they returned back to the witness's home, she's like, "Oh, why didn't I take DNA samples? Why didn't I take photos or look for tracks? Why did I run?" And in a sense, this is kind of a common theme that we see with a good handful of extraterrestrial encounters, where something almost possesses these people to have this sense of fear and to just run and to not look back. And then after they process it, they're like, wait a second, does that, what just happened? And the same thing goes for Bigfoot encounters as well, where you get this huge sense of fear and really for no explanation either. So, this investigation and this story that she told is really cool. She did also co-write a book with Richard Dolan called Admissible, And she talks about, in this particular interview, about how to conduct investigations and how to practice safety, which is so important that I wish more people would speak about, those that do boots on the ground investigations, where practicing safety is incredibly important. Okay. Now, as many of you know, I love portals with all of my heart. Portals, puck wedgies, and ramen. That's it. That's all I need in life. And I had the privilege to speak to two people that spoke in depth about portals. One of them being Trey Hudson, the other one being Jessica Jones. And it was through Jessica Jones's story of a team member who was able to enter a portal was I able to speak to Trey Hudson. And these two interviews are incredible. They are amazing. And one of them with Jessica took place in April, and Trey took place in June. These interviews on shifting the paradigm. Chris says, "Where's Puck?" He's right here, but he's going to be more significant as I continue with our 2022 roundup of the year of all of the shows that we've covered on this channel in 2022. So, when it came to speaking with Jessica and then Trey Hudson, he mentions that while they were in an area, which he writes in his book, the Meadow Project, exploring into the South's Skinwalker Ranch, that two of his teammates seem to allegedly, possibly, have entered a portal that looked like a cube when caught on FLIR. And this is when I heard this story, my ears were perked up so high you have no idea. I was like, tell me every single detail about this. But it was because of his story, Trey's story and Jessica's story, because they're a part of the same team, that it did make me hesitate just a little bit about entering a portal. Now, would I still enter one? Yes, absolutely, no hesitation. But from from the encounters that they had, there seems to be consequences and or side effects when entering a portal. So these two team members, which their names have not been disclosed to me, stated that they entered into like almost this black velvety environment, but it was totally pitch black. And on camera, from what Trey was seeing, his team members disappeared. They were gone for a few moments, and they weren't able to see an environment on the other side because to them it was pitch black. But once again, they were able to feel this velvet fabric on their body. They soon exited this location, and unfortunately, one of them did pass away a year later, while another one did have significant health side effects. In this story, what was really caught my interest in particular was after what happened to these two people that entered the portal and came back out. Trey stated that started the story with monkey bears. Have you heard this term? I haven't. Yes, we've all heard of gummy bears, which are absolutely delicious, but I do prefer Sour Patch Kids, if I had to be honest. But gummy bears are still pretty good. And when he spoke about these monkey bears, what happened was they were in this location in February. It is freezing cold. You have to wear a jacket in the location that they were at. But in the middle of nowhere, they saw a woman in almost office attire, no jacket, like really no winter clothing, and talking to Trey and the rest of his crew, the rest of his teammates. "Hey, have you seen the monkey bears?" And Trey looks at her. He looks at everyone else and he's like, "Monkey bears? Like, what on earth are you talking about?" She's like, "Come, come. I'll show you all my monkey bears." And this story could not sound more insane, more fictional. But it gets even weirder. He mentioned that this woman, again, who's wearing no winter attire, it's freezing cold in this location. And she just urinates right next to them. Now, there was no alcoholic bottle in her hand or anything like this. She did seem rather obscure, like not fully with it, but I mean, they were not close to any type of civilization. There is no way that this woman could have just walked from a bar right into the forest and found Trey and the rest of his team. Like, from his understanding, it was almost impossible. So if you want to hear that whole story, which I promise you it is so enticing, go ahead and watch that interview with Trey Hudson, because it's crazy. Lavera, thank you so much. It says, thanks for being incredible. Ah, I really do appreciate that. And hopefully you are enjoying this roundup of all the shows that we've done in 2022. If you're liking it, make sure to hit the like button right here on YouTube, because we'll only do this once a year. This roundup is only one time a year at the end of the year. Chris says it's real good. Yes, fantastic. Okay. Moving on to our next really interesting interview is with Paul Thigpen and Diana Pasulka. And the reason to why I'm grouping these two together is because both of them look at the conversation of UFOs from a religious, very specifically a Catholic lens. When I first entered the field, I heard time and time again that if we got disclosure, that it would shatter people's religion, it would shatter people's worlds altogether. And I'm like, okay, I mean, can I have some evidence on why you think so? Like, what's going through your mind to come up with that conclusion? Well, I finally found two people to give me those answers, and it's actually the total opposite of what I've been told time and time again these last 2 years I've been in the field. And this is why I love doing this show, Shifting the Paradigm, where I'm able to interview people that specialize in very specific topics. Both of these people, Paul Thigpen and Diana Pasulka, mentioned that no, 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 no. If we were to get UFO disclosure right here, right now, it would be those that have a religious background that would stand on that even stronger, because they already believe in angels, they already believe in demons, they already believe in a god, and what we would consider these aliens and demons to be, in a sense, alien, right? Because they don't originate on Earth, therefore they are alien. So if you have that kind of mentality, right, these people that have a religious background would thrive on it. It's not going to ruin their religion. It's not going to shatter their worlds. They're going to be ready for that situation. And Paul writes it in his book in great detail on in his book Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Catholic Faith. And then Diana has written a few books, one of them being Beyond American Cosmic and Posthumanism. So both of those, if you enjoy researching religion and having this fascination with UFOs, both of those interviews are going to be mind-blowing for you. I mentioned on, I think, both of those, if not both, and definitely one, that I've always been interested in religion, have it from any culture. And there was one point in my college career where I actually wanted to get a major in religious studies, but unfortunately, my university did not have that degree. So I went ahead and I just took the only class that they provided. And I thoroughly enjoyed that class, looking at, it was Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even the Navajo cultures as well, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. And I think that, in my opinion, here's what I'm going to share my opinion with you. In my opinion, I thought that it was very eye opening, but also to where if I needed to speak to someone from a different culture from my own, if you have that background knowledge, you're able to interact with them better. And very specifically, if they were to have a UFO experience and they wanted to talk to somebody about it, if you understand a little bit of their background, a little bit of their religious beliefs or their beliefs in general, it's going to be easier for you to communicate with them, right? Right, exactly. So I really enjoyed both of these interviews, which again, I believe are hand in hand. Chris says, Buddhism isn't a religion, it's a way of life. It's actually both. It can be classified either as a philosophy or as a religion, depending on how the person specifically wants to perceive it. But I've heard that one before, and I think it's a great point to bring up for sure. This interview with Brandon Fugel has been the most popular show on Shifting the Paradigm. It was such an honor to speak with the owner of Skinwalker Ranch and to ask all the burning questions that I had. And I wish I had so much more time with him instead of just an hour and a half. But there was a lot that we got to speak about regarding him and his own personal research and a little bit of his life, but then also looking at the series of his TV show, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, that is on television. And I think a lot of people would really, really be interested in this particular interview if you have not seen it. But I can assume that the majority of you have, because once again, it is the most popular show on Shifting the Paradigm on my channel. And absolutely mind blowing. The same thing goes for where I interviewed the superintendent of the ranch, Thomas Winterton. That was a lot of fun. It was really fantastic. What was interesting about his interview in particular was there was actually like really terrible internet connection because he was doing the interview in his office at the ranch, on the ranch. And I my router, it just died. Um, and I'm like, I had to message him, I think through email, like using like my cellular data. And I said, Thomas, I'm so sorry. My internet is totally down. Let me call you back in a few minutes when I pull up everything back to normal. When I got him back on the show, he says, Christina, don't worry. It's happened more than you could expect. Every time that I'm in my office on the ranch and I attempt to do an interview, either my internet or the other person's internet goes down. It's nothing new. It's not your fault. It's just a reoccurring theme. And I'm like, wow, that's terrible. That's honestly dreadful. But I felt a little bit more at ease that it wasn't, at least to his knowledge, my fault. Which leads into another Skinwalker Ranch type interview, and that was with retired Navajo Ranger John Dover. This particular interview, between you and me, and don't tell anybody, but this one had to be one of my all-time favorite interviews of the year 2022. Why? Great question. Let me tell you why. It's because we spoke about Skinwalker Ranch. We went into detail on skinwalkers. We spoke about UFOs. We talked about Bigfoot, and not just from a theoretical perspective. He encountered these things himself, and or he spoke to witnesses that did. He has done so much boots on the ground investigations, especially with his badge of being a Navajo Ranger, that the things that he says are credible. And so this interview as well also had terrible internet connection on my side and on his side as well. And he stated that whenever he speaks about skinwalkers in particular, the internet always goes out in his place. And I'm like, are you joking? He says, no, I'm serious. And that information I have not told before here on this channel. So that is new information that I would like to share it with you on that. But overall, well, I mean, it was just internet crash after crash after crash to where I actually had to edit it to make sure that it all went in smoothly. But it was a nightmare of a show in the sense of internet. But the information that he provided it blew my mind. If you haven't seen that interview or have heard it, please go listen to it, go watch it. If you're interested in the concept of skinwalkers and all of these things in the Navajo Nation, you're going to love that particular show. XR says Navajo Nation people know a lot like Indigenous people in Australia, very enlightening. Yes, that is very true. E Bravo says it was another great interview. Listen to Dave Paulides' interview, him at the premiere Missing from One UFO. He says some interesting stuff. He definitely does. So great. Everything that John is a part of is incredibly fascinating. So go take a look at that particular interview. Chris says, Christina, when you get your RV, are you going to go to Skinwalker Ranch? You betcha. That's going to be one of my very first stops when I get the RV. I've already had an invitation to go to the ranch. So, of course, I'm going to take him up on it. And I'm definitely going. Pretty darn excited when that does happen. This next interview is with Emily Zarka, and this took place back in November. And what I really enjoyed about this one was I was already a big fan of her work on Monstrum, which is a PBS series on YouTube as well. And she classifies herself as a monster expert, but she looked into mythology of like from across the world, looking at all these types of different monsters, and she stated that monster history is human history. And for myself in particular, I've always had an interest in mythology. I do love a good monster story. I just simply don't have the time to do that kind of research. So being able to speak to Emily on this, it was really exciting because it not only is she an incredible storyteller, but she's also an impeccable researcher as well, along with being an English professor at Arizona State University. So you know that her research skills are incredible. So that one, we spoke about El Silbon, who was a cryptid in South America. And while I may have roots in Venezuela, I've never heard of this entity before. So I was like, please tell me everything. I want to understand. I want to know what cryptids take place in my home country as well. And I won't go into detail on it because she's a much better storyteller than I am. But we cover that one. We cover some winter cryptids because we did this interview back in November. We also spoke about the Wendigo or the Windigo and a few others as well. And so, if you love a good monster story, if you love some good mythology, this is the interview to watch. Another Emily that I interviewed just recently is Emily Fleur. And she, I think, is the only person in my generation that I've interviewed that is researching Bigfoot. So I really loved her perspective on her fresh perspective on researching Bigfoot, but also maintaining the environment of which these cryptids reside as well. And I've spoken to a few privately, a few Bigfoot researchers and enthusiasts privately, and a lot of them didn't mention the things that Emily did. She's very dedicated to her research. She's very dedicated in preserving and helping Bigfoot to the best of her ability. And I think that if you want to hear something new from someone very young who is going to be the future of Bigfoot research, do look at this particular interview because I personally really enjoyed it. There are two more I would like to cover before we continue on to our next show, but that is with Ben Kirkwick, where we spoke about Peru and Sacsayhuaman, Egypt and the statues, all that architecture across the globe, along with ancient civilizations and the Younger Dryas. So for his show in particular, we looked at all of these ancient civilizations, and it goes to show that when I was originally doing the research for UFOs, it it sprouted out into all these other things that it got me interested in ancient civilization as well. The last one I would like to cover is with James Fox, the director of Moment of Contact. which was just recently released. And it was absolutely incredible to speak with him, to hear about his journey that he did when he went to Brazil, and all of the little details that aren't actually mentioned in the documentary that he was able to tell us. And to where he felt like one or two times that his life was on the line, that he thought he was going to get shot. Really great, really great show. Do look at that one as well. It was pretty recent because it took place back in November. And moving on to, you know what? Let's do the review on Missing 411, the UFO Connection. Um, this, first off, how many of you have watched it? I wanted to watch it as soon as it was released, but things kept coming up and I was able to watch it actually today. Um, I let me hold on. So, right at the start, I would like to say that I watch many documentaries on UFOs, the paranormal, and other fringe topics. And I watch them with the perspective of a newbie. That is, I put aside all of my preconceived notions, theories, and ideas and try to view them as a member of the general public, not as a researcher with any bias. And so I often read or hear negative and critical reviews of documentaries given by luminaries of these topics, and it surprises me how sometimes the reaction is arrogant and negative. Why? Why? Well, because these documentaries are more often than not made for newbies to these topics, new minds being exposed to the subject matter, and not made for the already initiated luminaries and authorities. Now, if those documentaries are full of bad information and deceptive fakery, then those negative reviews are certainly justified. But otherwise, if they are producing solid information with facts that can be corroborated, then those are the ones that I would recommend to friends and others new to the topics. Now, Dave Paulides has created several Missing 411 features, all very thought provoking with factual cases and witnesses, as well as educating viewers about best practices for safety when hiking, hunting, and camping in the wilderness. So, for those members of the public new to the topics of his work, they were landmark documentaries and perfect companions to his extensive series of books. So, for me, this documentary did not disappoint. I can say right at the beginning that, in my opinion, it is great for newbies and but also seasoned researchers alike. So let's get into this review. There will be some spoilers in this review, so for those that do not want any spoilers, go check out my music channel and then come back in a few minutes. So the film opens up with Dave asking questions about the UFO phenomenon. Do these entities have our best interest? Or are we just an ant farm? Could we offer other worlds new DNA that needs to refurbish their existence? Or something that our human mind cannot fathom? The way that he asked these questions near the very beginning, I thought were incredibly thought provoking. And I kind of held on to those questions throughout this documentary. So then he snips to an interview that he did with George Knapp on Coast to Coast AM, where George is talking about Skinwalker Ranch and a possible connection with missing people. E Bravo, thank you so much for the super sticker. And then from there, after he takes this little snippet from Coast to Coast, he goes into a little bit of a recap of his previous work when it comes to missing people, and then goes into the very first case of Ray Salmon. What's interesting about this documentary is that he does a whole 360 throughout the entire thing. And what I'm saying will make a little bit more sense as I go along with this. Again, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the documentary and you don't want spoilers, jump over to my music channel, Cosmic Portals, and then come back a little bit later. So when it came to Ray, he went missing on a camping trip that he went on his own. Usually, when he goes camping, he takes his beautiful wife with him. But this one time that he went out, he didn't bring his wife. But he did go to a location that he frequented, I think it was like once a year, to my knowledge, for like about 10 or 15 years. And so he was very familiar with this area. However, the last time that he went, he didn't return. He brought 2 dogs, multiple rifles, multiple pistols. He brought a special boat as well. And he was a very knowledgeable hunter, very knowledgeable when it comes to the wilderness and being a great camper as well. So it was very weird for him not to return home. It was stated that during his time out in this location in British Columbia, that he shot 3 bullets into the air, which usually means, almost always means, SOS. After that situation happened, the search and rescue team came and began to look for him. But what's particularly interesting about this encounter, this report, is that when Dave Paulides spoke to one of the search and rescue team members, he stated that not only was it just these volunteers looking and, policemen looking for Ray, but also the emergency response team. And they were armed with fully automatic weapons, which was the very first time that this search and rescue team member had ever encountered something like this. And he's been doing this for years, but he's never encountered people, a part of the ERT, to have weapons with them when they're looking for somebody. But it gets even weirder. While the ERT found Ray's pistol, found his backpack, and a few pieces of clothing, they told the rest of the search and rescue team that no, you can't go any further. That's it. Everything is solved in the sense of we found all of his items, we just can't find the body. Do not search any further. And what's even weirder than that is that those pistols, that backpack, they were not returned to Ray's wife, which in most instances, when items like this are found from a missing person, they are returned back to the family as a sign of condolences. That wasn't the case for this particular encounter, which makes it very suspicious. First, you're having people that never come to these search and rescue missions to be fully armed, to tell everyone else, nope, it's unsearchable, you can't come back, and then not returning the personal items back to the family. That is pretty weird. And we're gonna circle back to that case, but he was also of German descent as well. Hold on to that piece of information. There were other encounters that Dave covered, and in every single one of them, which there are a total of 6 cases that Dave covers in this documentary, in all of the rest of them, they were all elk hunters. And almost all of them, minus one story to my knowledge, they were all of German descent. Now, Jimmy and I did an episode of The Missing on Mysteries with a History, and Dave Paulides really emphasizes that if you are German, and very specifically, if you're a really, really smart German, you have a higher chance of going missing than anybody else, which is really weird. Also, if you're hunting for mushrooms as well. So if you're a really smart German scavenging for mushrooms, that's it for you. Like, you're gone. But in this case, these were all elk hunters in this documentary, and almost all of them were from German descent. One in particular actually being a German physicist who got lost, who disappeared in Arizona, which really piqued my interest. Unfortunately, that particular case was very short compared to the other ones because there's very limited information. But in all of these cases that Dave looks into, not only were they German, not only were they elk hunters, but during the same time of their disappearances, there were reports of UFO sightings in the area as well. And that's where we're getting this UFO connection in this documentary. If you are a newbie to the field, you're going to love this documentary. I personally thoroughly enjoyed it. But if you've been in this field for 20, 30 years and you know all the cases, you're going to be like, yeah, I knew that information. Well, let's be very clear. Then that documentary was not made for you, because those that are super knowledgeable in the field are maybe less than 1% of the population, if that, probably like 0.0001%. But for everyone else, they're like, "Oh, this is new information for me." And there's one case that he covered that I was so glad that he did, and that was about Carl Higdon. And Jimmy and I covered this case. It's a wild story, because he is one of the very few people that have encountered an extraterrestrial, allegedly, went onto the ship and came back. And a reason to that, when Dave interviewed Carl Higdon, which is already an amazing interview to begin with, because this took place in the 1970s and he's still alive today to tell this story. He states that, and if you're familiar with the story, I'm not going to go into detail on it. They do go into detail in the documentary, but just touching on it, Carl mentions that he encountered this extraterrestrial by the name of Ozo, and Ozo takes him on this ship. But the reason to why he returns Carl is because he believes that he had a vasectomy, and which is really interesting, actually, about that. And Dave goes into more detail on that aspect throughout the documentary, but it is believed by a few of these disappearances that have this UFO connection to it that the rest of them did not have vasectomies. It was only Carl that did, and that's why, to his understanding, that he returned back to Earth and was able to spend the rest of his life with his wife, which he is still alive today, I would like to mention. That case in particular that Dave covered went into great detail with all of the information that has been collected, even the pictures of the bullets, the drawing that Carl did of this entity by the name of Ozo. And I really enjoy that story. So I was very happy that Dave covered it in his documentary. But there were a few cases that I had never heard of. And I was like, that's super interesting. I'm taking notes as I'm watching this because I want to look into more detail of what the heck is going on. Overall, Dave did incredible research on this. He did also interview some specialists as well, not only the witnesses that were people related to the witnesses that were left behind, but he had also interviewed an ex FBI agent by the name of John DeSouza, and that was a really interesting specialist to have in this documentary, where in this interview, John mentioned that he was kind of like the alien abduction guy in the department of the FBI. So he was the guy that looked over all all of these cases. And I was like, oh, very interesting that Dave was able to get someone like him in this documentary, and someone that I would love to speak to and to hear his insights during his time a part of the agency, to see what he has to say or willing to say about the UFO phenomenon. Because he mentioned, and they made sure to make this pretty prevalent in the documentary, but he mentioned that there is a connection between aliens and interdimensionals, or that aliens are interdimensionals. And I was like, that's a really cool detail to add into this documentary. I'm in. I'm watching this wholeheartedly. So if you haven't seen it, that documentary, The Missing 411, the UFO Connection, do take a look at it. It is fascinating, but look at it with the general public's eyes, with newbie eyes. Because if you're going to look into it with your knowledge of the UFO phenomenon, you're going to be disappointed. You will. But if you're looking at it with these fresh eyes, you're going to, I think, thoroughly enjoy the documentary. Brian, thank you so much for the super sticker. I do appreciate that. Thanks. So that is just a short review on the latest documentary that I have been waiting months to see, and overall, I was very pleased with it. Moving on to going back to the 2022 roundup of this show, there are a few episodes on Mysteries with a History that I found very interesting, fascinating, or that were incredibly memorable. One of them being Mysteries of Planet Mars. Now, it wasn't necessarily because of the topic that Jimmy and I covered, but this show took place back in January of the 21st. And what was really funny about this one is that my internet shot, like it went down, not just for a few seconds. I think it was for like 30 minutes. And so I had to call Jimmy. Jimmy had to put me on his calling system so that I could finish my show on my channel using Jimmy's calling operation system. And it was such a nightmare. I was so embarrassed at the time that nothing was working on my end. My notes were on Google Docs. They weren't actually on my laptop, so I had no notes. I had to just do everything from memory. And then plus I was doing it on the phone, so like the audio isn't that great. That has to be one of the most memorable episodes I've ever done on Mysteries with the History because everything went wrong. Jimmy handled it great the moments that I was MIA. I was like it's in a black zone. But then when I came back, it was it was a lot of fun. Stanley, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, thanks, Christina. Keep ya heads up, people, little mushrooms. Everyone should check out Patient 17. I'll look into that. The next show that I really enjoyed was the Mandela Effect. Not only is the information incredibly interesting for those that have encountered it themselves, but I think the highlights for that show was actually playing the game, where I showed two images and you had to guess, you, the viewers, along with Jimmy, had to guess which one is the correct logo, the correct brand, and things like this. And a lot of people were kind of like 50-50. Some of you got it right, some of you got it wrong. Some of you were like, I have no idea what the difference is. But the one that stuck with me the most was Jif and Jiffy, the peanut butter. I remember it being Jiffy, and now it's apparently Jif. And I'm like, what's going on? I remember my very favorite commercial that's in Spanish is about Jiffy, the peanut butter. And it's about this mom and this son who are, well, the mom is helping the son putting on a rain jacket, giving him, socks, and she keeps saying es por tu bien, es por tu bien, like it's good for you. And then at the very end of this commercial, the little boy puts peanut butter on bread and he gives it to his mom and says es por tu bien. And I found that absolutely adorable, but I remember it being Jiffy and not Jif. Also, is peanut butter like super healthy? I don't know, it has so much sugar in it. I don't know if that's like actually healthy for you, but really great in protein. Deranged says it was called Jiffy. Thank you. Thank you. So that's why this episode in particular was one of my favorites, was because we were able to play that game, but also look into how this whole thing started with the Mandela effect. And I was like, huh. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. More people are catching things that are like, wait a second, that doesn't look right. And I find that a lot of fun. This show, Gobekli Tepe, was the most popular show of 2022 for the category of mysteries with a history. And this topic, this show, which we did back in March, really opened my mind to ancient civilizations that predate what modern archaeologists believed to when humanity flourished. Also, it's Jimmy's favorite term, phrase, location to say, Gobekli Tepe. He says it so well. And it was a lot of fun to hear him say it over and over again. But it was actually because of him, very specifically, did I even consider looking into this location in Turkey, was because he found it fascinating. He would say it so much on his show. And I'm like, what is this place? Like, what is going on? Jimmy, like, why do you like this location so much? What's so special about it? And after doing the research, extensive research on this location, I'm like, okay, now I understand why you like this place. It is super cool. So much so that it is the most popular show on Mysteries with the History for 2022. The Mysteries of Utah was my second favorite show. And you'll probably guess which one my favorite is for my regular viewers and listeners. Cough, cough, puck wedgie. But The Mysteries of Utah, the entire state of Utah is on psychedelics of some kind. It is such a whack state full of everything insane that I told myself as soon as I get the RV, Utah is going to be one of the very first destinations because there is so much going on in that location that it is incredibly difficult for someone in the field of the unexplained to ignore. You have to go there and investigate everything: UFOs, cryptids, the paranormal, obviously Skinwalker Ranch, looking at all of the First Nation legends there as well. It is a crazy place, and I am so excited to go there. And it was because of that show I was able to learn so much about that place and to pinpoint exactly where I want to go in Utah when I go. But saving the best for last, my favorite show on Mysteries with a History for the year 2022 was The Mysteries of the Bridgewater Triangle. And you might ask, why is that, Christina? Why was it the Bridgewater Triangle that fascinated you the most? Well, that's where I learned about the mischievous little troll goblins, the Puckwedgies. Before doing this show, I had never, ever heard of Puckwedgies. Not once. It never came across in any of my research. Then I did the show for this weird location in Massachusetts, and that's where I fell in love. I found the cryptid of my heart, and that is the Puckwedgie. But the Bridgewater Triangle is like Skinwalker Ranch on steroids. It is a crazy location where you're getting everything weird, including Puckwedgies, in this one concentrated location in Massachusetts, which is actually a very big area. And it was so enticing. It was so amazing that Jimmy and I did a part one and a part two because there was so much to cover. And I definitely made sure to bring Puckwedgies in part two as well. And I was also very happy to interview Jeff Belanger, who I had on a little while ago on Shifting the Paradigm. He had done extensive research on the Bridgewater Triangle, also being a part of a documentary about the Bridgewater Triangle. And we spoke about Puckwedgies as well. So that was incredibly exciting because they're my favorite cryptid, not because of how they act, merely because their name is so cute. You know, right now, people are really interested, kids, teens, and very early adults are super interested in squishmallows. Is that what they're called? These like little squishy pillow thingies that are super cute. I am waiting for them to make a Puckwedgie one, and I will buy it in bulk. I'm not much for plushies or toys or things like that. However, if they were to make a Puckwedgie version, I would buy it. No hesitation. Easy. Here's my money. Take it. Loved it. Chris says Puckwudgies rule. Are they hockey fans? I have absolutely no idea. Ron says Puckwudgie. Like what? It's this little guy right here. Super cute. Ah, love it. So, a few more things that I would like to cover for this 2022 roundup, and that's the unknown zone. It has been a new addition to the channel that started up back in October, where it is a short, about like 8 to 15-minute video on a very specific topic. I've done about 4 so far, but my favorite one has been about portals and wormholes. But the most popular one has been the mysteries of the Sphinx. Once again, these are very short videos, 8 to 13, 15 minutes long. Do take a look at these because we covered portals, the Sphinx, we covered the Piri Reis map, and the Alaskan Triangle as well. There will be more to come in the near future, so do keep an eye out. But I would like to state that the next episode of the Unknown Zone is delayed because I am doing something very special for the next episode, and it's taking a lot longer to create, but it will be posted soon. Out of all of the shows that I do on this channel, the Unknown Zone takes me the most amount of time, being about 24 to 30 hours to do the research, write the script, and then create the video as well. And you're like, oh, that's so much work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Now, for my research shows, such as the other ones that I do, Strange Paradigms, Mysteries with a History, and even Shifting the Paradigm, they do take me a lot of time as well to do the extensive amount of research that it deserves. But the Unknown Zone is the most time consuming show on this channel. But keep an eye out for the new show that's going to come out. I think you're really, really going to love it. As many of you know, I also do YouTube shorts here on this channel where I try my absolute best to post a video every day of something strange, something that caught my attention, something weird, or something informative. Turns out, though, that the most popular video on this channel, was a short about the movie Prey with 1.1 million views. I was blown away by 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 those views when I came across the stats a little while later, but that movie in particular was trending at the time that I posted it, and I didn't expect the amount of views it would receive. 1.1 million views. Insane. No other video has compared to that one just yet, but I do try to continue and post YouTube shorts at least 4 times a week on things that are weird and strange to get everyone involved on this channel. So, no matter if you are a newbie or a seasoned researcher, you're going to find something here on this channel that you enjoy, that you found interesting, or that you weren't familiar with, because this channel is no longer about just UFOs. I thought it was when I first started. But as I began to do more and more research, I realized that there is a convergence with the paranormal, with cryptids, with practically everything mysterious. So this channel has branched out so much in just 1 year to where we're producing so many shows a week for you and for myself as well to catch up with all of this immense research that's taking place not only right here on this planet, but in our universe as well. So it's been a lot of fun, but I have one more topic of shows that I got to cover, and that one is Weekly Strange News. This one, out of all the shows that are done here on this channel, Weekly Strange News is the most popular every single week. And that is a show where I look at all of the mysterious news and strange headlines from around the world, sometimes on my own and sometimes with guest co hosts such as John Russell, and then the monthly roundtable with Jimmy and Micah. And this these shows have been a lot of fun doing. I started this back in May, and I feel like I've been doing it for years now. But it's so much fun to look at all of these news items that, don't pertain to like depressing news or like things that are negative, but looking at just the weirdest, craziest things, along with UFO sightings as well that happened during the week or that were written that week that took place a few weeks or a few months back. And I received such good feedback on this show that I will continue to do shows like this one every single Friday at 3 p.m. PST, because while it does take extensive amount of research to do and to prep for and to be ready with, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. This latest one with Jimmy and Micah was the most popular on Weekly Strange News. And it wasn't the latest one, it was the one prior, excuse me, where we actually attempted to speak about the UAP report that we still haven't received yet. And I am still waiting. I'm still waiting on that report. When are we going to get it? At this point, I have absolutely no idea. We were also we were hinted towards thinking that we were going to get UFO congressional hearings in December by Christmas. Here we are, still no UAP report, no congressional hearings. I hope by 2023 we'll get something, because in the summer of 2022, May, June, July, it was hot with UFO news. In May, we got practically our very first UFO hearing in like 55 years, right? Then we were getting more information about the AYMSG, which turned out to be Arrow. And then it kind of just stopped. We stopped getting information from the government, from these mainstream news outlets. And it was kind of disappointing. So I do hope by 2023 we will get more information. We will get this silly UAP report and more congressional hearings as well. This last show, this very, very last one that I did with John Russell, had to be one of the most hilarious episodes I've ever done on Weekly Strange News. John was here a little bit earlier. I hope you're still here, my friend. But we covered everything absolutely strange, such as the Wisconsin health service said people in Wisconsin don't lean into your holiday traditions of eating raw meat because it's going to give you salmonella. It's going to give you E. coli. And turns out eating raw meat, as they call cannibal sandwiches or tartare, is a prevalent thing in the Midwest. And this blew my mind because for me, raw meat in general, this is a personal opinion. It really grosses me out. I can't handle it. Do I like sushi? Yes. I like the cooked version of sushi or like imitation crab, like that's great. But like the real actually raw stuff, I just can't handle it. So this story was so much fun. John mentioned that he used to eat raw meat, and then we went on a rampage about pickle juice and ketchup on everything. And I cannot stand pickles. Like pickle anything, I can't do it. Like anything that's like soaked in vinegar, nope, sorry, gonna pass. But this show was absolutely hilarious. It was so much fun. Do take a look at that latest show on Weekly Strange News. I think that you're also going to thoroughly enjoy it. And keep an eye out for next month in January for our next roundtable with Jimmy Church and Micah Hanks, because they're so much fun. I enjoy speaking to these two people so much. But out of Jamie says, I love pickles. I'm glad you do. But raw meat is gross. I'd rather go vegan. Raw meat is it's not my cup of tea. It's not for me. But I would like to ask you this question. Out of all of the shows in 2022 that we've done, first off, which one was your favorite? If you can think of one right now, let me know in the live chat which show was your favorite on any topic that we covered. And then, which topic do you like the most? Is it shifting the paradigm? Is it mysteries with a history? Is it weekly strange news? Is it the unknown zone? Is it shorts? Which, because we have so much content here on this channel, there's got to be one that you like in particular. So let's hear it. I wanna, because I like them all. I enjoy all of them, but I would say that maybe weekly strange news might be personally my favorite. Um, because I'm able to kind of speak with you a little bit more one on one. Well, while you let me know which ones your favorites are. Oh, Sassy says the missing people case. That one was pretty fun. I enjoyed that one a lot. Took a lot of research as well. Darkstar says Weekly Strange News episode 6. What was special about episode 6? I'd like to know. Well, while you continue to tell me that, there is just a few things I would like to mention regarding UFOs in 2022. As I touched on a little bit earlier, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we got the congressional hearings back in May. So, Congress held its first hearing of UFOs after more than half a century. Members expressed concerns that regards of whether or not the objects are alien or potentially new technology being flown by China, Russia, or another potential adversary. The unknown creates a security risk for the US itself. This is where we were able to kind of get to meet Bray and Moultrie, the heads of the AOI MSG, which now has changed to Arrow. But the star of the congressional hearing was Gallagher. Why? Because he was one of the very few congressional people that were there that did their research on the UFO phenomenon, where he was throwing the hardball questions. And I think for everyone in the field, we're like, yes, yes, keep going, Gallagher. Like, you go, man. And then for people that aren't familiar with the phenomenon, they're like, actually, what is going on here? Like, am I missing something? What's the Maelstrom case that took place in Montana in 1967? What is Gallagher talking about? But then for the rest of us, we're like, oh snap, he went there. And I think it goes to show that when you do your research and when you are electing these people to represent you, Gallagher did a really fantastic job. Now, when he asked this question about the Maelstrom Air Force Base regarding the ICBMs being inoperable, Moultrie said, "Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Sorry." I mean, I pulled my hair out in that instance. I'm like, you're the head of the AOI MSG and you don't know, or you're just saying that you don't know? Because either way, I'm incredibly disappointed in what you're saying, Moultrie. But for those that aren't familiar with the Maelstrom Air Force Base case, Jimmy and I did cover that a while back, where we were actually able to speak with Robert Salas, an officer that was working on the base at that time of the incident back in 1967. Is about UFOs and nukes. So do take a look at that on Mysteries with the History if you are interested in that particular case, or if you're not familiar with it. It's a wild one. And it's a reoccurring theme across the globe, not just the United States, where entities, military officials, Air Force bases are testing out their nuclear missiles and then they become inoperable. The officers see a UFO in the area, beaming these lights at it, stating, yeah, whatever you want to shoot, you can't do it. You can't do it now. You can't do it ever. And we go into detail on a bunch of different locations where incidents like these were seen. But Gallagher, he did his research. Maybe he was watching the show. I don't know, but he spoke about it and it was awesome. Then in July, specifically July 15th, the AOI MSG got changed to the name Arrow, which I think was a great idea because that is a mouthful. AOI MSG, or as Moultrie said in the congressional hearing, ASOG. No, what was it? Either way, it was disgusting. However he said it, it sounded so terrible. And Arrow, it just sounds so much better. I would recommend that. But on July 15th, 2022, Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks, in coordination with the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, amended her original direction to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security by renaming and expanding the scope of the Airborne Object Identification and Management Group, the AOI MSG, to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW, due to the enactment of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022, which included a provision to establish an office in coordination with the DNI with responsibilities that were broader than those originally assigned to the AOI MSG. The mission of the Arrow will be to synchronize efforts across the Department of Defense, the DoD, and with other U.S. federal departments and agencies to detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest in or on or near military installations, operating areas, training areas, special use Air Force, and other areas of interest, and as necessary to mitigate any associated threats to safety of operation and national security. This includes anomalous, unidentified space, airborne, submerged, and transmedium objects. That wording is actually a really, really big deal, what they said right there. But gets even more interesting. Just recently, the Debrief posted an article regarding that President Joe Biden signed the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, for fiscal year 2023 into law, providing a total of $800 billion to the Pentagon and settling the course for the U.S. national defense strategy for the coming year. Now, that in that budget, a lot of things are going to take place. But one thing in particular is looking into the unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, also known as UFO, enforced by the military. Specifically, the fiscal year 2023 NDAA includes provisions that could open doorways to greater transparency in government on the issue by providing protections for whistleblowers, in addition to expanding the scope of current investigations by the DoD's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW. We have been waiting for this information for a year. We were kind of hinted we're going to get this, and now it's finally placed into law. That was just signed last Friday by President Joe Biden. So this is a really big deal. We should be seeing something in 2023. Hopefully we will get those UFO congressional hearings sooner than later, now that there is going to be this protection for whistleblowers, which is so darn exciting. And I'm very pleased that with that huge law that's taking place with all this money, $800 billion, that UFOs should be in that bill. Thank you very much. Logan, thank you so much. It says, I declare you best UFO host 2022. Congrats. Thank you so much. Well, that is it for our roundup today. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy this roundup? Please let me know in the live chat. Please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell on YouTube, as you do not want to miss this episode of Mysteries with the History, which I will post the topic tomorrow on Twitter. My Twitter handle is eyes_on_the_skies. And then on Friday at 3 p.m. PST will be weekly strange news, where I'll be covering all the strange news and mysterious headlines from around the world. So keep an eye out for those shows. Be safe. And remember, keep your eyes on the skies.